Welcome back to Fameshow host. Today we're diving deep into one of the most controversial and talked about NBA stories of our time, Bronny James. That's right, the son of LeBron James, whose name has been met with as much scrutiny as it has hype. In this video we're going to break down Bronny's rollercoaster journey from high school prodigy to a beleaguered NBA prospect and his surprising turnaround in the G League. Get ready for twists, stats, and a whole lot of drama as we peel back every layer of this story. Let's start at the very beginning. When Bronny first emerged on the national radar, critics wasted no time labeling him the most hated NBA player. And honestly, it wasn't just idle chatter. There was genuine outrage. People argued that Bronny didn't earn his place in the league. They claimed he was nothing more than an artificially planted prospect, drafted largely on the strength of his famous last name rather than his basketball skills. Remember back in high school at Sierra Canyon? Bronny was ranked as the 21st best player in the country. Sure, he was talented, but many argued that even that ranking was far too generous considering the more deserving players left behind. Critics pointed out that he was chosen ahead of athletes who had worked their way up on merit. From the start, the narrative was set. If Bronny was going to be in the NBA, it wouldn't be because he outworked his competition. It would be because he's LeBron James Jr. Now, let's talk about his early struggles. Transitioning from high school to college is tough for any player, and Bronny's numbers at USC certainly didn't quiet the critics. As a freshman, he averaged only 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 2.1 assists per game. These stats were a far cry from what one would expect from a top 20 recruit with so much hype. But it wasn't just college. Bronny's summer league and NBA preseason performances only deepened the doubts. Picture this, he was statistically one of the least productive players on the court. His shooting percentages dropped to around 29% from the field, and he struggled from beyond the arc, hitting a measly 8% in some instances. Every game seemed to reaffirm what critics had been saying all along: Bronny wasn't ready. Let's shift gears to one of the hottest topics, his draft and contract. When Bronny was selected in the second round with the 55th pick and then handed a guaranteed 4-year deal, it sparked outrage among basketball purists. Fans couldn't wrap their heads around how an unproven player could be given such a deal, especially when other second-round picks were barely guaranteed a spot on the roster. Then came his NBA debut, a moment that should have been magical. Imagine stepping onto the court for the first time alongside your legendary father, LeBron James. History was made as the first ever father-son duo in the NBA took the floor. But as breathtaking as that moment was, the performance itself was anything but. Bronny's minutes were extremely limited, and while the moment was historic, it quickly became clear that he wasn't making the impact many had hoped for. Realizing that the NBA environment might be too intense too early, the Lakers made the decision to send Bronny down to the G League. The idea was simple: give him a chance to develop in a less pressured setting, where mistakes could be a stepping stone rather than a headline. In his G League debut, however, the story wasn't immediately rewritten. The same early struggles persisted: low scoring, poor shooting, and the turnovers that had become all too familiar. For a while, it seemed like nothing could change the narrative that had been built around him. But then something remarkable began to happen. Let's talk about those breakthrough moments that turned heads and began to change the conversation around Bronny. In one standout performance, he exploded for 30 points on efficient shooting. A game that not only silenced many of his critics, but also showcased his ability to lead a game. In another, he dropped 31 points, including clutch plays and key rebounds, proving that he could be a force when given enough time on the floor. These performances weren't just statistical anomalies, they were clear signs that Bronny was evolving. Suddenly, the narrative began to shift. No longer was he just the overhyped kid with a famous name. He was now a legitimate scorer, a budding playmaker, and even a defensive contributor, with several games recording multiple steals. His shooting percentages began to rise significantly, with some games showing 43% efficiency from the field and an impressive 46% from three-point territory. But just as the signs of improvement were emerging, the Lakers' management decisions began to create more questions than answers. Despite his promising G League performances, Bronny was shuffled between the NBA and the G League with inconsistent minutes. Imagine finally starting to hit your stride, only to be pulled out of a game for just a few meaningless minutes in a nationally televised matchup against top-tier teams. In one particularly painful instance, the Lakers doubled his minutes in a game against the reigning NBA champions, hoping to test him under fire. Instead, Bronny's inexperience was brutally exposed. He ended up shooting a dismal 5% from the field, and his turnovers mounted in a game that only added to the narrative of mismanagement. The post-game interviews didn't help either, as the team's coaching staff tried to spin his performance into something positive, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Despite the turbulence of management decisions, one thing became clear: Bronny was showing significant improvement in the G League. In his latest stretch of games, his performance metrics have turned heads. He's now averaging over 21.9 points per game, along with 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists, and 2 steals. These aren't just numbers on a stat sheet. They're the markers of a young player steadily coming into his own. The transformation has been dramatic. Where once he was seen as a liability, Bronny now lights up the court with assertiveness and confidence. In one memorable G League matchup, he not only scored efficiently, but also played like a true floor general, setting up his teammates and showing off an improved defensive game. His shot mechanics, decision-making, and overall presence on the court have evolved, painting the picture of a player who's learning how to manage the pressure and live up to his potential. So where does that leave us with Bronny James today? The path forward is filled with both promise and caution. On one hand, his recent performances in the G League have been nothing short of encouraging. The young player who once struggled to even hit his shots is now putting up numbers that suggest he could be a valuable contributor if given the right environment. But here's the catch: while the improvement is undeniable, most experts agree that Bronny isn't yet ready to be thrust into a full-fledged NBA rotation. The pressure and intensity of the big league require more than just raw talent. They demand consistency, experience, and above all, the confidence that comes from steady development. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty details that have defined Bronny's journey. In the early stages of his G League career, his stats painted a grim picture, barely scraping by with single-digit scoring in some games. But as time went on, there were several breakout performances that reshaped his profile. For instance, there was that game where Bronny exploded for 30 points on 56% shooting from the field, including clutch three-pointers that turned the momentum of the game. In another matchup, he registered a near triple-double with a season high in assists, rebounds, and steals, showing that his game was evolving beyond just scoring. As we near the end of our deep dive into Bronny James's journey, one thing is abundantly clear: his story is far from over. The evolution from a polarizing draft pick to a promising G League performer is a narrative full of lessons about patience, development, and the pressures of living up to immense expectations. Critics still have their reservations. Many wonder if the Lakers can manage his transition properly, or if the constant back and forth between leagues will continue to hinder his progress. Others see his recent improvement as a sign that with time, Bronny might finally shed the heavy burden of his family legacy and forge his own path in basketball. And there you have it, the full rollercoaster ride of Bronny James, from the early days of intense criticism and doubted potential to a promising turnaround in the G League. It's been a wild ride, and this story is still unfolding. What do you think the future holds for Bronny? Can he truly silence the critics and earn his place on the big stage? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this in-depth journey through one of basketball's most debated stories. Please like and subscribe for the latest entertainment and celebrity news. This is Fameshow host signing out. Until next time, stay tuned and keep the passion alive.